Hi again everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Fillers and Filters. Again, I'm Noella, or you can call me Miss Snowy, and I wanted to be your virtual teacher, your buddy when it comes to language learning. So in this channel, I try to upload at least one video per week about my experiences in learning English as a second language, about my knowledge on language theories, as well as some anecdotes about my journey as well. So if you still haven't done it, make sure that you subscribe to my channel so that you will know once the content becomes available. And of course, you watch my videos, like them, and leave a comment if you have some suggestions, for instance, on topics that you want me to discuss. So in this episode, I wanted to talk about one question that you might have been wondering about, and that's, why do you speak better when you're drunk? And of course, there are two things that I wanted to talk about in answering the question. So number one is there's usually a gap between your linguistic competence and your linguistic performance. And that gap is usually bridged when you are drunk. So what happens? Why is the gap smaller when you're drunk? And the answer is because you have lower affective filter. So when we say lower affective filter, that means you care less about what other people think. You have less control over yourself, over what you say, over your emotions. And so your performance and your competence are almost at par with one another. So we'll be talking about these two issues as we go along in this video. So as I have mentioned earlier, there usually is a gap between your linguistic competence and your linguistic performance. But for those who are not familiar with these terms, let me introduce linguistics first. So when we say linguistics, it is the systematic or the scientific study of language. And Chomsky, one of my favorite linguists, in fact, introduced the terms or the concepts linguistic competence and linguistic performance. So he said that linguistic competence refers to your knowledge about the subject, or should I say, knowledge about the language. So when we say knowledge about the language, that means your knowledge about grammar, vocabulary, structure, word formation, punctuations, paragraph development, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, when we say linguistic performance, as the term implies, this refers to how you use or how you apply your knowledge in real life or pragmatic situations. All right, so you might have noticed in your own experience that there usually is a gap between your performance and your competence. What you know about the language is usually different from, or your level of knowledge about the language would usually be different from your performance, from how effectively can you express yourself using the language, be it in writing or in speaking. Now, why is there a gap between the two? One of the reasons why there usually is a gap between the two is because most language classrooms focus on competence, especially in second language classrooms, informal classrooms. They would usually focus on introducing you to the grammar, the rules of grammar, basically rules of grammar, rules of punctuation, rules of paragraph development, rules of this and that, because we are second language learners of the language. And less emphasis is given on linguistic performance. So there's very limited opportunities for us to practice language in the classroom. And that is quite understandable because we have limited time in class. So we can't do recitations all the time, or drills all the time, or writing activities all the time. So we don't get to use language inside the classroom. But how can we resolve that? Remember in my previous video, I have told you that language is a practical skill. So if you want to improve your linguistic competence or your linguistic performance, then you will have to practice language. You will have to use language as much as you can in your day-to-day activities, right? So yes, that's basically how we resolve that issue. Now, another reason why there's a gap between your competence and your performance is because of affective filter. Affective filters is a term introduced by Stephen Krashen, who is, again, one of the front runners in second language acquisition. And he said that affective filters are psychosocial factors that affect your language learning. And these factors would include your environment, your attitude, the pressures, expectations, and the like. So we can deduce that there are external factors and there are internal factors. So external factors would refer to your environment. The pressure is coming from your environment, while internal factors would be from within you. So practically your attitude about learning, your attitude about risking things, your attitude about criticisms, your attitude about new things or trying out new things. So yes, I would have to say that I think that affective filters are primarily internal. So even though there might be pressures around you, there might be expectations, it would actually depend on you whether or not you're going to be affected by these pressures or these expectations. And of course, when it comes to your attitude, there's only one person who can resolve that. So how do you resolve your attitude towards learning is, well, it relies solely on you. All right, so the thing is, the lower your affective filter, the better your performance is. So basically, if you have good linguistic competence, it usually is demonstrated when you're drunk because you have lower affective filter. So when we speak of lower affective filter, that means you have less control over what you're saying. You don't really filter what you're saying, or you cannot really filter what you are saying. Because if you remember, when you're drunk, you actually commit a lot of mistakes and you don't care about committing mistakes. In fact, a lot of mistakes are committed when you are drunk. So I wouldn't go around advising you that you should get drunk before you go to an interview or before you speak in front of a big audience. But definitely we can learn something from that issue or from that situation. We can actually mimic our attitude when we are drunk. So that when we are drunk, we care less about our environment, we care less about what we're going to say, we care less about the people around us or the expectations of people around us. So yes, that's basically how we can build our confidence. So confidence is a very big issue for me when it comes to language learning, because you need to practice language and along the way you will commit mistakes. And only if you have enough confidence can you tolerate committing mistakes. If you're confident, that means, number one, you believe in your capability. But sometimes it's really hard to be confident when in the first place you have very mediocre skills or very average skills. So what then should you do? You will have to improve your skills so that it's easier for you to improve your confidence. A lot of people might be wondering that there might be the trap or there might be the danger of becoming overconfident. But to me, overconfidence can be measured using the formula that your skills should be at par with your confidence level. So that if you have higher skills, then it follows that you should have higher confidence level. But if you have average skills, then it would be overconfident if you have higher or a much higher confidence level than your skill level. So improve your skills, your linguistic skills, then your confidence. Being confident also means that you care less about your environment. That no matter where you are or whatever you're supposed to do or whoever your audience is, your performance wouldn't really differ that much. If you're speaking in front of a large audience, well, it's normal to get nervous sometimes, but you should be able to perform well. Similarly, if you're just in a casual conversation or in a casual setting, your performance should also be the same. So confidence should not rely on your environment. So if you're confident, you should be less affected by your environment. Although I've been telling you that you need to believe in yourself, it is also important to recognize that third, there is always a room for improvement. I have this one friend that I appreciate so much because she's so invested in my endeavors. And in this endeavor, I just started vlogging and somehow I don't really know what to do. I don't really know how to improve my craft. And she is, generous enough to give me comments on almost everything. With the way I look in front of the camera, with my background, with my lighting, with my approach. Should I use a conversational approach or a formal approach? So she would usually give me suggestions. And of course, if you're confident enough, then you should be ready to accept these suggestions, or some might consider as criticisms. So there we're able to answer why you would usually perform better or why you would usually speak better when you are drunk. And that's because the gap between your linguistic competence and your linguistic performance is smaller because you have lower affective filter. So hopefully you have learned a thing or two from our discussion on linguistic competence, linguistic performance, and affective filters. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Au revoir!